I don't think you're gonna love my new job.
You can't expect your uncle to start you out at the top.
Janie, I never said anything about Uncle Louie giving me a job.
I don't understand. You walked away from the department and a good paycheck. Why else?
You know what I've always talked about.
Remind me.
Well, think about it. You should know me better than anybody. We are engaged.
Well, I know what you've always talked about doing, but it's so impractical. A little boy's dream.
Thanks for the show of confidence.
It's just not realistic. These days, particularly.
Well, it's what I'm doing.
A private detective. You're going to be a private detective.
Not going to be. I am one.
Did you even think about asking your Uncle Louis for a job?
Not really.
I mean, why? Why did you quit the department anyway? Over that awful shooting? These things happen.
I hadn't told her the whole story yet, what really transpired up at Nitty's handbook. But now I did. By the end of it, she was angry.
They just came into Barney's and grabbed you. Didn't even tell you what they were up to. Louses, bums. And I suppose they expect you to testify for them at the Nitty trial.
I will testify for them.
Then why quit then? If you'd stayed with the department and testified, you could get something out of it. Why help them cover it up and get nothing?
I am getting something out of it. A private investigator's license and a gun permit. So I can do business. Mayor Cermak himself guaranteed it.
Oh, Mayor Cermak. Well, that's different.
I told her about the Cermak meeting, and it impressed her. And I told her about the Nitty hospital visit, and that scared her. But when I told her about General Dawes, she perked back up.
Why don't you take advantage of the generous offer? $3,000 is like $1 million.
$3,000 for supervising pickpocket security at the fair would be easy money. It'd make my first year in business a rousing success, even if not a single other client walked in the door.
And it would be just the beginning. You get something much better out of Dawes and your uncle. You could get a real job with a bank or a business or something.
Janie, I do have a real job. I am in business. I'm president of the A1 Detective Agency. I'll be first in the yellow pages.
Where do I fit in? What about the house we talked about?
Look, I still have the nest egg money in the bank. I managed to start up the A1 without dipping into that, thanks to Barney's largesse.
How does Barney factor into this?
I told her about my arrangement with him for the office space, playing night watchman, about the furnishings he'd provided, the works.
He's a good friend.
Give me a year to get my feet under me and we could start looking for that house.
It's not like there aren't foreclosures available.
Happy now?
Happy. Nathan, you know I only want what's best for you.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema. And as of my 1000th episode, hey, I'm the collector too. And of course, I'm your evangelist of the imagination. And as John Campea called me, and I still don't quite understand it, which I leave up to you, although people have come close, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am Robcasting at you from the Robservatory. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. First of all, I want to wish everybody a happy Boxing Day. And I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas, spending time with your loved ones, or even spending time with those you don't love so much but have to put up with. I hope it all went well. Hope Santa was good to all of you. I had a lovely... I was the only Jew amidst our group of folks, but hey, Hanukkah starts too, so it worked out for everybody. And I didn't even have any protesters at my house, so that was fun. It's all good, and we're approaching the new year, 2025. Wow, it's going to be wacky. Who knows what's going to happen? You know, in the old Mickey Mouse Club, Wednesday was Surprise Day. I think 2025 is going to be a surprise year, quite frankly. And, you know, may you live in interesting times. Isn't that what they say? gosh, I got to give mad props to my friend Rob G for sending me, the first person to send me this article that I'm going to delve into today. There's a link below. It's a Variety article. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. I'm sure a lot of YouTube pundits have been talking about this already, but I haven't talked about it yet. And it kind of just crystallized for me what me and many other people in the YouTube film space or the imagination connoisseur space. I mean, I'm the only person who calls you all imagination connoisseurs, but let's face it. I'm a geek. You're a geek. Some people might call us nerds. Then people would say, Rob, geeks and nerds are different. Hey, I put whatever label you want on it. I don't want to get into geek identity politics. It's hard enough navigating those waters when you're not talking about geeks or nerds. That's why I like to say imagination connoisseurs. Those are two previously existing words that when put together, they don't change the meaning. They just become better, like Reese's peanut butter cups. Imagination connoisseurs. Think about it. Doesn't that sound great? I mean, yeah, I coined that phrase, but it just makes us all sound that much more erudite, doesn't it? Even though we're really at heart geeks. That's all right. But anyway, so I wanted to talk about that, and I just want to give this a disclaimer. Before I get into what I'm about to talk about, people always get triggered. They always get triggered when I want to hold us, we imagination connoisseurs. The label itself presupposes a certain level of intelligence on all of our parts. And I've talked about this before, so you should know it if you've watched this channel. I would ask all of you, why did Elon Musk, this is a quiz, sort of. Maybe it's sort of rhetorical, but sort of a quiz. Why did Elon Musk call his AI, generative AI assistant to X, why did he call it Grok? Grok. Where did that word come from? If you watch this channel, you already know. But where did it come from? Why Grok? What does Grok mean? When you saw him name his AI Grok, and don't get mad at me for bringing up Elon Musk. This isn't about Elon Musk. It's about why that generative artificial AI is called Grok. Why is it? Now, I would like to point out, if you don't know the answer right away, it's kind of the point I'm making. I'm not calling you stupid. I'm not saying that at all. However, if you already knew what that word meant or even where it came from, it would enhance your experience. You might even, the first time you heard it, smile a little bit, or you might scoff, or you might sigh or guffaw. But the point I'm making is, if you already knew what that word meant and where it came from, well, you might have a different opinion, or you might just, rather than, what does Grok mean? Well, I'll put you all out of your misery for those of you who don't know. It is a word that comes from Robert Heinlein's very famous, although not so famous anymore, 1961 science fiction novel, Stranger in a Strange Land. And once Tom Hanks wanted to play the protagonist of that novel, Valentine Michael Smith, I don't know whatever happened to that, and I don't know why Stranger in a Strange Land has never been adapted. Probably because it maybe appeared too dated, maybe Heinlein's fallen from favor, I don't know. But the word Grok is a word he made up, comes from Mars, not Barsoom, but it comes, see, that's another phrase, that's another term, sci-fi term. But Grok basically means to understand something in all the different ways it can be understood. To truly grok something is to understand it, I like to say, three-dimensionally. And it came from that book. Now, when I was a young whippersnapper, when I was a kid in elementary school, actually, it started in junior high. I didn't really wear buttons when I was in elementary school. But in junior high, you get those Guess jean jackets, or actually I started out with probably members only, Levi's denim jackets. They screamed out for buttons. And, I would go to downtown Seattle, and there were places around the Pike Place Market. There was Time Travelers, Golden Age Collectibles, a few head shops. Head shops or bookstores usually had, or alternative bookstores. The Revolutionary Bookstore always had the best pins, the best buttons, because they would say things like, God is coming and boy is she pissed, which, I thought was funny. When you're in junior high, it's like, okay. But I had a pin that said, I grok Spock, which at, in elementary school and junior high, grokking Spock, well, certainly better than the writers of Strange New Worlds do today. So I'm just saying. But anyway, so grok, and you'd go places and you'd see people wearing pins that said that, I grok Frodo, whatever. But the point was, it enhanced your experience of day-to-day life. I could be like, yeah, okay, we reach, we are one. If I saw somebody with a pin or use the word grok, I'd like, we've read Stranger in a Strange Land, which means we've read Robert Heinlein, which means we could have read more of his young adult fiction like Glory Road, or we could have read Starship Troopers, or The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It meant that, there were people in the world that we shared a certain philosophy. Well, I'll give you another one. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Nicholas Meyer originally wanted to call Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which, by the way, started out as Star Trek II, The Vengeance of Khan, but they had to change the name because Star Wars Revenge of the Jedi was coming out in 1983. So Paramount was asked politely to change the name of Star Trek, The Vengeance of Khan, which, by the way, in my mind, is a better title because I was in Mrs. Butler's typing class, and every single day when we did our typing exercises, I wrote, we are this many days away from Star Trek II, The Vengeance of Khan. So vengeance was a longer word to spell on my typing paper, and I just did that for fun. And she thought it was hilarious. And then, of course, the movie wasn't called The Vengeance of Khan. And The Vengeance of Khan, I mean, Wrath, Vengeance. Well, Vengeance would have been better. So they ended up changing in deference to George Lucas and Star Wars. They changed the name to The Wrath of Khan. But that wasn't the original title of the movie. The original title of the movie was Star Trek II, The Undiscovered Country. And, of course, the executives and people at Paramount said, you can't call a movie that. What the fuck does that even mean? And then, of course, we go ahead 9 years. Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Again, a rhetorical question. What does that title mean? Where does that title come from? Do you know? Some people, I'm sure, do. It's rhetorical. You don't need to answer it. The point I'm trying to make is, if you don't know what that title means, that's fine. But if you do know what that title means, that means when you first heard the title and you hadn't seen the movie yet, you have a larger holistic understanding of something Nicholas Meyer, as the writer-director of that film, was trying to comment on. And even after you saw the movie, if you knew what the term "the undiscovered country" meant, Grocking calls it the future. Of course, hearing, as we know, a big part of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, was the Klingons' love of Shakespeare. And the joke, you haven't read Shakespeare unless you've read him in the original Klingon. There are many allusions to Shakespeare's work in that film, beginning with The Undiscovered Country, which actually is death. The idea of death, because that is the place, the country they call it, where no one has returned from. And where does that term appear? I would dare say one of the most influential literary works, it's a play, because this play is quoted often, and that is Shakespeare's Hamlet. Now, whether you've read Hamlet or not, over the last, since it was written, hundreds of years, Hamlet has become a foundational piece of literature for all of Western civilization, and probably all of civilization, because it has been quoted or it has been alluded to. Certainly there's been many different versions of Hamlet. Laurence Olivier made one, Kenneth Branagh made one, Mel Gibson was in one. Hamlet's one of the most, I would say, beloved stories that we have, well, in all of human creation, really. So when you're going about your daily life, you might hear things that come from Hamlet that you didn't even know were from Hamlet. And they just flit right through your subconscious or your consciousness, and you'd never know. And I would say that means that your daily life was slightly less rich than it could have been. Now, this is not a criticism. I'm just pointing this out. The more we know, the more you know, the more interesting and the more rich our life becomes. After all, we have to make our own meaning. Sure, you can find meaning in certain places. Some people are very religious and find religion a comfort, which is great. I tend to look at storytelling of all kinds, whether it's movies, whether it's literature, whether it's music. Give me a great concept album. I love storytelling because to me, and art in general, because art and storytelling, its whole purpose is to comment on human existence in all of its infinite, call it what you want. But to know where a lot of these, and I would dare say this, to go even further, whether you are religious or not, it's probably a good idea to know the basic religious texts in the world, whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita. I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Where does that come from? When you see it on the Oppenheimer poster or whatever, do you know? A lot of people don't. Now, I would say this. One of my favorite quotes is, of course, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. That's also from Hamlet. Hang on a second. I called this up. Let me give you the whole line. And therefore, as a stranger, give it welcome. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Well, what does that mean? And a lot of people, it gets quoted in movies, random characters say shit like that. Well, it basically means that no matter how much any of us know, we don't know it all. There's more out there around us. There's more things to know. And I've always believed that the more you know, the better life is. Now, I'm not saying we have to know everything. But if you're a fan of science fiction, fantasy, horror, you're a fan of comic books, you're a fan of prog rock, you're a fan of Led Zeppelin, or if you're a fan of Depeche Mode or country music or whatever you're a fan of, paintings, it doesn't matter. There's usually something else. There's all of these things are cross-referenced in our world. Now, in 1984, when I was watching Alex Cox's Repo Man, which, by the way, I highly recommend if you haven't seen it. A lot of people haven't seen it these days. It's wild. It still works as a satire, as a science fiction movie, as a punk rock film, as a youth film. Works on many different levels. But there's a scene when actor Laurie Walter is talking to Emilio Estevez. Emilio Estevez's Otto. And they're outside and he's like he has a fire in a 50-gallon oil drum, and Otto says to him, he goes, you do a lot of acid back in the hippie days? And they're having this kind of an existential conversation. And Tracy Walter says, you find one in every car, meaning like a Christmas tree air freshener. You find one in every car, you'll see. And then what he goes on to say, he says, you know, sometimes you'll hear something. You'll hear a word, you'll hear a phrase, and in the movie he says shrimp or plate of shrimp. He uses it as an example. And then he points out that suddenly you'll hear it everywhere. Like, it's not like it suddenly was being said. It was being said all the time. It's just that phrase was not in your brain. And once it gets in there, suddenly you realize, wow, it was all around me. I had no idea because I didn't know it. I didn't recognize it. I hadn't heard it. And then when you do, it's suddenly, it's like part of the universe is opened up. And that's kind of how I feel about most things. And I have found that our film community, and the same is true, let me bring it back, to movies or storytelling. Last night, I watched The Searchers. We're going to talk about this on Let's Get Physical Media, but I did get the first Warner Archive 4K disc of The Searchers and watch the whole thing. All I can say is the quality, Warner Archive, it's a BD 100, just gobsmacking. But John Wayne says in it, "That'll be the day," a couple of times. That'll be the day. Well, I'm not saying the first time anybody said that was in that movie, but there's a famous episode of Star Trek called Yesterday's Enterprise where Picard says that very thing. And I was like, oh. And suddenly I'm watching The Searchers, and I put it on. I first watched the Kino Lorber Internal Affairs 4K. And if you've never seen that movie, what a banger. To Live and Die in LA and Internal Affairs, great double bill. Chef's kiss. And by the way, thank you, Kino Lorber, for keeping that Paramount catalog alive, because if they're not going to do it themselves, you should do it. And thank you for doing so. But anyway, again, I smiled as I watched this movie. I put it on at 1 a.m. Everyone had gone to bed, and I was still up, and I couldn't resist. After watching Internal Affairs, I had to put on The Searchers and watch it. Ooh, boy. My God, what a transfer. I hope all the other Hollywood studios are taking notes. But anyway, the connections, those connections that you see. And I've often talked about when I was a kid, one of my favorite shows, and I credit Chip Wall, Mr. Chip Wall, who I was in a class called ELP, the Extended Learning Program for Gifted Children in junior high. And the first time I saw Connections, James Burke's Connections, British, I don't know if he was a television personality or a historian or whatever. If you watch there on YouTube, you can see the greatest single shot in television history, and you can see James Burke. But Connections was a show that would begin like in Mesopotamia or something, and it would say this one invention, and then it would carry you through what happened if they invented this one thing and how it went all the way through history, hundreds and hundreds of years or 10 centuries, and where it would wind up. And as a kid, to me, it was a great story. Like, oh my God, what does this one invention lead to, and where does it take you? So I was just curious about the world as a kid, and still am. Well, what happened recently? It was announced, for you film fans out there, that Christopher Nolan is going to make a big version of the Odyssey. And some of you cheeky bastards were sending me clips from Armand Desante's version that he was in the Odyssey, the TV miniseries, which, by the way, isn't very good. But, there's a lot of people, and I joked, well, I wonder if Christopher Nolan is going to cast a de-aged Sean Bean to play Odysseus. Or is it a sequel to Troy? And that's why they would... And some people ask me, why would you say it was a sequel to Troy? And I'm like... And again, like the Bible, like Shakespeare, Homer's epic poetry, the Iliad and the Odyssey are, I thought, foundational stories that we all learn, especially in the West. And I got some pushback on X from that. I made some jokes, and people said, well, I just didn't learn it. And I'm like, I find that shocking. Because, again, a movie like Wolfgang Petersen's Troy did come out. Brad Pitt playing Achilles, King Agamemnon, Odysseus himself, played by Sean Bean, in movies like Troy. I would have thought that the story, and I mean, so many films and stories come out of Homer's work. I'll give you an example from my own life. I've often spoken of one of my favorite science fiction writers. Actually, my favorite writer. One of my favorite writers who's written great horror novels. He's written great detective thrillers. He's written epic science fiction, including the 4 Hyperion Cantos. And I would dare say Hyperion and Fall of Hyperion are... Well, it was written as one book and they had to cut it in half. But Dan had to cut it in half because, I know him. I don't know Dan. But he wrote to a duology that I would say, if you want to read a fucking great, if you're in the mood, you can, and you want to bring in the new year right, these 2 books, Ilium and Olympos. Homer's work is central to both of these books. I understand it's a little heavy, literally heavy, figuratively heavy, intellectually maybe a little heavy, but not really. This is epic science fiction that also uses Homer's work in a very unique way. Even the gods of Olympus, as you might have guessed, are in these books. And so is Homer's epic poems, both the Iliad and the Odyssey. And of course, the word Odyssey comes from Odysseus. And what happens in the Odyssey? Well, Odysseus wants to get home from Ithaca. Or wants to get home to Ithaca, excuse me. You know, Trojan Wars, all that. It's time to get the fuck out of Dodge. Let's go home. But it's not as easy as he might have thought. So I immediately am looking forward to to be honest, somebody adapt these books. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you were smart, you could adapt these books at the same time Christopher Nolan is making his well, if you read them, you'll understand why. But hey, if you want to read some great epic science fiction, remember this one's first. Ilium's first, Olympus is second. I can't recommend these highly enough. Plus, this is a really great way to get yourself a primer on what exactly the stories are going to be about. Just saying. Why am I saying all this? I mean, I think I've made my point. You understand. The world is a richer place the more you know. Especially for us imagination connoisseurs, because so much of what we love is connected to other things. It's why you can marvel when Francis Ford Coppola used Ride of the Valkyries in Apocalypse Now and cringe hardcore when you see Zack Snyder use it in Watchmen. You can get upset about it, like I do, every time I watch Watchmen. And I don't hate Watchmen. I just think all the problems in it are distilled by the fact that Zack Snyder used Ride of the Valkyries for his Vietnam sequence. Which to me means, not working there, Zack. That's verboten. You don't get to use that. You don't get to use that. It's not the same meaning. Not at all. As a matter of fact, it tells me you didn't understand what was going on in Apocalypse Now, but you chose to do it without any real understanding of why Coppola used it and why it was awesome in Apocalypse Now and why it was made my eyes roll in Watchmen. Just saying. Anyway, I'll leave it up for you to come up with that one. But anyway, so that's a long-winded way of me saying, well, let's talk about the Sony Spider-Verse. Here's what I don't understand. First of all, I guess I should read this article. And I give Rob G, my friend Rob G, all the credit in the world. He was the first person to send me this article that was in Variety today. But let me just tell you, I think this article is a great summation of why corporate Hollywood does not work. And as corporations and the way corporations do things penetrate deeper and deeper into Hollywood with guys like David Zaslav and all these people taking over, it's why Hollywood has a problem. And it's especially why IPs are so poorly mishandled. And I've been saying a lot. We all say this a lot, but I'm going to try and give you a perfect example because it was laid at our feet today. Laid at our feet. Let's see this article if you haven't seen it already. This was in Variety today, December 26th. It was published at 8:02 a.m. Zach's Scarf, oh no, it'd be Scarf because there's no C, wrote this article. Sony Pictures CEO says Madam Web flopped because the press crucified it. Our Marvel movies are not terrible films. They were destroyed by critics. First of all, let me give you a memeable moment. Okay, there you go. Do what you want with that. Or not. One more time. Sony Pictures CEO says Madam Web flopped because the press crucified it. Our Marvel movies are not terrible films. They were destroyed by critics. And I'm sorry if I get the CEO's name wrong. I didn't put it through a proper pronunciation Google search. Sony Pictures CEO Tony Vinciquerra recently told the Los Angeles Times that Kraven the Hunter is probably the worst launch we had in the nearly 8 years he's been at the studio, adding, I still don't understand because the film is not a bad film. Now, let's stop for a moment and let's take a gander. Let's go to Wikipedia and let's look up old Tony's history. So Vince Aquera was born in Albany, New York, and grew up with 3 sisters in a 2-bedroom apartment. He performed various odd jobs in his youth and began working in radio ad sales in college. He graduated from the University of Albany in 1977. Vince Aquera began his career in television broadcasting ad sales at local stations and later CBS, and was named COO of Hearst Argyle Television in 1999. He joined Fox in December 2001 as president of the Fox Television Network. In 2002, he was named president and CEO of Fox Networks Group, which included Fox Cable Networks, Fox Broadcasting, Fox Sports, and Fox International Channels, and he was named chairman in 2008. After leaving Fox in 2011, he spent time as an entertainment consultant and advisor at TPG Capital. Vince Aquera was inducted into the Broadcasting and Cable Hall of Fame. He has sat on the boards of directors at Univision, Pandora Media, Motorola, Mobility, DirecTV, and Qualcomm. In May of 2017, it was announced that Vince Aquera would be filling the role of CEO, that's Chief Executive Officer of Sony Pictures Entertainment, left vacant by Michael Linton after he announced his departure for Snap Inc. Vince Aquera was hired to oversee Sony Pictures Motion Picture Group, Sony Pictures Television, and Worldwide Media Networks. During his time there, he has increased the amount of collaboration between Sony divisions like the Motion Picture Group and Sony Interactive Entertainment, which resulted in the development of productions like Uncharted, The Last of Us, and Twisted Metal. He is credited with reversing a downward trend of film box office performances and strengthening the television division, leading a dramatic turnaround with 5 consecutive years of increasing profit and record high operating income for the company. So I would say, in his role overseeing Sony Pictures Television, Vince Aquera was involved in the hirings of Mike Richards and Maya Bialik as co-hosts of the television quiz show Jeopardy! After the death of the longtime host Alex Trebek. Okay, I would say that our boy here certainly has enough credibility to run something like Sony. I would say he has absolutely no credibility at all deciding or commenting on whether or not the movies that his company makes are good or bad, because there's nothing in his background that would give us any indication he knows the difference. Nothing. Ad sales, running a company, how to make money. He is completely outside the creative process of making movies. Also, I don't think he knows anything about making movies. There's nothing in his past that would suggest that he does, other than in terms of money, watching where money's going. His skill set lies elsewhere. And yet, he's the CEO of a company that makes movies. So, he's the Sony Pictures Chief Executive Officer. I don't want to take anything away from what he's accomplished in his life, but let's go on and read what he has to say. I still don't understand because the film is not a bad film. Tony, you, I would posit, don't know the difference. And you certainly don't know what makes a good Sony Spider-Verse movie either. Because if you can't tell the difference from, say, a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, a Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, or your animated Into the Spider-Verse films, you can't really comment on why Morbius, Madam Web, and Craven failed, because you're looking at the wrong things, as are most of the executives in Hollywood. Craven opened in theaters December 13th to a paltry $11 million, the lowest debut yet for a Sony-released Marvel movie. The movie's current domestic box office total stands at just $18 million, while its global haul is $43 million. These are more or less catastrophic results for a superhero movie and cap off a lackluster year for Sony comic book movies after Madam Web flopped with $100 million worldwide and Venom: The Last Dance became the franchise's lowest grossing entry. Let's just touch on Madam Web for a moment, Vince Aquera said. Madam Web underperformed in the theaters because the press just crucified it. It was not a bad film. It did great on Netflix. For some reason, the press decided that they didn't want us making these films out of Craven and Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. Really, Tony? Really? They also did it with Venom, but the audience loved Venom and made Venom a massive hit. Now, I would say, Tony, that you're saying that your movies, Madam Web and Craven, didn't work for the critics, but Venom, which also, let's face it, didn't really work for critics either, you're now comparing and contrasting those movies and saying the critics were the reason that Madam Web and Craven didn't make money. Now, I would think somebody like you, Tony, who has all kinds of access to analytics, would certainly know the difference. But I would posit the problem with Tony here is he's looking at analytics that are telling him that why weren't these movies profitable? First of all, they're in the Spider-Verse, and that alone should mean, should mean that don't Spider-Man movies make money? Don't Spider-Verse movies make money? I mean, see, here's the thinking, Tony. They're thinking, and this is the problem, they're thinking of Spider-Man or the Spider-Verse as a brand, and within that brand, there's no such thing as quality. It's a product. We have a product that consumers want, and all of it falls under the same umbrella. This is the problem with corporate thinking as it applies to Hollywood. You can't, it's not a product like Coca-Cola is a product. You can't look at market share and penetration, and if you start something like the Pepsi Challenge, you're going to create a lot of buzz. It doesn't work that way. There is no Pepsi Challenge with your Spider-Verse movies. You can't compare Venom to Madam Web because they're looking at it, oh, it's a Spider-Verse movie. Aren't these things the same? Isn't Venom the same as Madam Web? Isn't Craven the same as Venom and Madam Web? Isn't Morbius the same? Aren't they part of the same thing? No. Here's the difference. Every movie and every story is its own thing. Every movie is made as its own business. It's its own LLC. You cannot think of a movie, and this is the problem, because corporate thinking is, and it sounds a little weird to say this, maybe it's not intuitive, but if you are working on a franchise project, here's a Burnett axiom. You can't expect your franchise to make your movie within that franchise successful. As a matter of fact, I would say just the opposite. If you, Hollywood, are going to make a franchise film, it is harder to make a great franchise film within the constraints of the franchise, the IP that you're working under, than it is to make a movie that is totally unique. Why? Because an audience already knows what made that franchise good in the first place. And by making another movie, you have already lost originality. You've already lost something that gave that first thing that created your IP in the first place. You gave an audience a startling, unique, interesting point of view or interesting things that they had never seen before. And by definition, when you are working within an IP, that means the newness and the excitement is gone. Now, sure, there's excitement. Oh, I get to see my favorite characters come back. But unless you do something that does what that original IP did, which is excite somebody, give them something original, give them something that excites them as much as the initial IP, which, by the way, is by definition harder to do, you're going to fail. And the problem with corporate thinking is they're not thinking of their individual movies as something that has to be approached as an individual film. They're thinking about it as something that already exists within the widget factory, like we're going to make Star Wars, or we're going to make Star Trek, or we're going to make Spider-Verse, and we figure since we've already got the audience, well, then we don't have to do our due diligence. We're just going to make something. Now, maybe that's a theory, but let's go on and read the rest of this article before I pontificate more. The critics' aversion to Sony's Marvel movies is one reason Vinciquerra thinks the studio needs to rethink how it moves forward with its Spider-Man universe tentpoles. Gee, you think? If it's snake bitten, if we put another one out, It's going to get destroyed no matter how good or bad it is, he told the LA Times. Okay, can I just read this again? It's snake bitten. If we put another one out, it's going to get destroyed no matter how good or bad it is. Tony, my man. First of all, you already lost, buddy. Once again, the Burnett axiom. I have a lot of them, but here's one. Your IP or franchise is only one great movie away from restoring its luster. It does matter how good or bad your movie is, because demonstrably bad films that really don't service the very IP. The ironic thing is, your thinking, Tony, has shown me that as, hey, you were head of Qualcomm. Hey, good for you, bud. But you know what? That clearly hasn't shown you that you know anything about creating IP. Because when you're saying it doesn't matter how good or bad a movie is, the critics are going to savage it. Let me tell you something about movie critics. Let me tell you something about fans. Let me tell you something about anybody that's covering art for a living. Do you know what all of us want? Do you know what all of us imagination connoisseurs, do you know what all critics, do you know what all casual moviegoers want? They want a good fucking movie. They want to feel something. They want to be transported, forget their cares, pack up their troubles in a new kit bag. They want to sit down in that darkened movie theater. It's probably the one place in the whole world where you can get a group of perfect strangers together that might hate each other in real life, that might be on opposite sides of politics or opposite sides of identity politics or opposite sides of religious belief. And you will get all those people to come together and sit in that darkened room right next to one another. They don't even know how much they would actually hate the neighbor that's sitting right next to them. But you know what? For that time, they don't hate anybody because they're all there to see the same thing. They're all there to be moved. They're all there to be emotionally whisked away. To fuck that up, to fuck up, to get all those people together in the dark, to pay money, to buy overpriced popcorn and overpriced sodas, and to take your whole family and to sit next to total strangers. I mean, that's a tremendous responsibility. That's amazing. That's powerful. Studios used to make movies that you would walk out, thinking about for days afterwards. Not just roller coaster entertainments that are supposed to put a smile on your face for a couple hours, but movies that would stay with you, that would resonate with you, movies that you remember 30 years later, like The Shawshank Redemption, which celebrated its 30th anniversary this year, or Forrest Gump. People are still thinking about those movies. Hell, as an aside, I found out there's a fucking abridged version of It's a Wonderful Life on Netflix. There's like 4 different versions, and one of them says abridged. And someone said, well, it's about rights issues. And I'm like, okay, first of all, the fact that an abridged version of It's a Wonderful Life with George Bailey not seeing a future where he never existed kind of a thing, that dark future, that alternative, which, is in every fucking time travel story ever, the fact that that was removed from the story and somebody thinks that's okay, well, that's problematic. Western civilization is definitely careening into the drain after that one. But I'm just saying, if you don't know the difference between what's good and what's bad about your own product, how did you ascend to the level? Well, I would say you ascended to that level because your skills should not have you commenting on whether a story your company is making is good or bad, because you clearly don't know. Nor do half the people that work in Hollywood today. Which is a problem if your job is to make entertainment. Anyway, while Vince Aquera doesn't believe Marvel's Sony movies are terrible movies, critics would disagree. Madam Web holds an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, while Craven didn't perform much better with reviewers and has a 15% Rotten Tomatoes score. In addition to Madam Web and Craven, Sony also earned negative reviews and bad box office with its Jared Leto starring Morbius movie. Sony insiders acknowledged to Variety earlier this month that Craven, Madam Web, and Morbius were creative and critical duds, even if they insist that Morbius, which made $167.4 million globally, did turn a profit. Remember, they only take half of that home, and that doesn't include studio overhead or marketing. Moving forward, they said, the studio will need to be more discerning about which, if any, of the studio's stable of Spider-Man characters should be elevated into their own movie franchise. Okay, let's listen to this again. Moving forward, they said, the studio will need to be more discerning about which, if any, of the studio's stable of Spider-Man characters should be elevated into their own movie franchise. More discerning? Okay, people. They've been making Spider-Man movies at Sony for almost a quarter century. Almost. I look around. I mean, you can't see it, but if you look, let's see it. Right here. Okay, this level of my Billy bookcases. If you follow this level around, it starts over there and comes all the way around and all the way around here. There's probably, I don't know, 200 Marvel omnibuses. Actually, they go up and down now, so now there's a combination of both. But in this room, if Tony gave me a buzz and said, "Hey, Rob, you're in charge of figuring out what our next standalone Sonyverse movie is," let me tell you, I could, in half a day, probably do more research on the character of Spider-Man. Now, let's face it, I've been reading Spider-Man comics for 50 years. I don't have to do research. But the fact that the CEO of Sony, look at it this way. How many movies does Sony make a year? How many movies does any studio make a year? Let's say conservative, let's just say 15. Now, what is the average price of a studio movie? I would say, let's just call it, let's be on the downside. Let's just say it was $75 million. So you're going to spend $75 million times 15, and you're a publicly held company or whatever. You're going to be spending that much money, and you're only making 15 movies a year. And of those, how many of them are IP? And of those, how many are from the Spider-Verse? Now, I would expect, I know, in Hollywood, it's really hard because everybody has a lunch to go to. Everyone's so busy. But if your company is spending $75 million 15 times a year, and let's face it, it's usually more, I would think that the top 10 people that run the studio, the top 10 people, should be the most educated people about whatever IP they're delving into, so they could get together like the quorum. Maybe if there's 12 people, you could have like a Battlestar Galactica quorum of 12. You could go on the Atlantea and sit down, or call your conference room the Atlantea and say that you're the quorum of 12 and you have to decide what you're going to do. If you're Battlestar Galactica nuts, which you should be. Anyway, I know that's a total imagination connoisseur aside. But you would think that those people would be the most highly educated people about the Sony Spider-Verse before they decided to drop $75 million on a movie. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you think that's the case? I know it's like people that would start talking about Grok, or people that are saying things like the undiscovered country, or people are saying whatever thing that they're quoting from whatever their favorite movie is. Somebody decides more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Do you have a friend named Horatio? The more you know. Now, you would think if a studio was making movies for a quarter century about one character, and you had the rights to make a movie about whatever your deal says you can make a movie about. Well, let me tell you this. Do you know how I know they're not doing their fucking job at Sony? Because they made a fucking Madam Web movie. Why? What brain trust came up with that one? And then, of course, if you're going to spend that much money, why hire? Now, I'm not going to slag off on the director of that movie because she's a woman. She's a very accomplished TV director, but she hadn't directed a feature. So, for your great tentpole property, you're not going to hire somebody who's made a feature before, who's worked with lots of special effects, who's worked with those kinds of budgets, those kinds of schedules. You're going to hire somebody new, or as Kirk might say, untried. Why would you do that? And of course, when the movie comes out less than ideal, why would you expect anything else? Why would you expect... Well, let me tell you something. I would also say this. Now, I want to talk about Craven for a minute. People didn't like Craven. Now, I would say that in the case of Craven, they picked a great director. I think that J.C. Chandor has made some banger films. I think he was a great choice. A Most Violent Year, All Is Lost. Here's three movies. A Most Violent Year, Margin Call, and All Is Lost. Those three movies alone. If you get somebody like that to direct your tentpole property, I would say good for you. And then he also made Triple Frontier, for Netflix. Now, want to know something else about J.C. Chandor? He wrote Margin Call. He wrote All Is Lost. He wrote A Most Violent Year. And he was a writer on Triple Frontier. So you hired Nauteur to make Craven. You know what I'm saying? You hired Nauteur that had written those movies. Do you know who didn't write on Craven? Oh, I know. You said it before I did, didn't you? J.C. Chandor. You hired an auteur to write and direct, to direct Craven, but you didn't allow him to write the script. You hired an auteur who's writing and directing. By the way, if you haven't seen Margin Call, if you want to see what J.C. Chandor can do, get this. He can take a room full of people, including the great Jeremy Irons, and watch, I don't know what you call it. Go to YouTube and look up Jeremy Irons finds out what's happening in Margin Call, or just derivations of whatever that is. Margin Call, table scene. Call it what you want. Kevin Spacey. It's a scene. It's about the subprime mortgage crisis. And by the way, if you're not doing much this weekend, do yourself a double favor. Do yourself a favor and watch the double feature of Margin Call and The Big Short. I know it's a movie about two movies about the financial crisis. I'm obsessed with these movies. I can watch them over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. I keep watching them. And that scene in Margin Call, I think I've watched that scene in Margin Call as a filmmaker and an editor myself. I've watched that scene in Margin Call probably 50 times. Never get tired of it. Kind of like the movie The Social Network, which, came out from Sony and is getting finally released outside of a box set. You'll be able to get The Social Network along with Panic Room in brand new steelbooks, which I can't recommend highly enough. But that's an aside. Watch those scenes. J.C. Chandor is a writer-director. You didn't allow the man who made All Is Lost, Margin Call, and A Most Violent Year. He didn't get to write. So, which tells me, director for hire. What does that mean? Hey, it's another corporate hire. Let's get this guy. Now, what did you do? You fucked up J.C. Chandor's career is what you did. You fucked his career, man. You fucked it up. Now, he didn't have to take the job. I know. But I'll bet you he didn't get the movie. He didn't get to make the movie he wanted to make because you great Sony executives who were responsible for giving us Morbius, Madam Web, movies that I'll tell you, I'm sure were finished by their directors exactly the way the directors set out to make them, right? No, because old Tony there and his cronies and Rothman, over there, they're like probably overseeing these things. None of those motherfuckers are Kevin Feige. And despite what you want to say about, 4 and 5, let's talk about phases 1, 2, and 3 at the MCU. Come on. 23 movies in the Infinity Saga. I would defer to Kevin Feige. He's had some issues with the studio. But what I was saying is, my God, Tony, you're not doing anyone any favors. You certainly didn't do J.C. Chandor any favors. Why didn't you let him rewrite the entire script? I mean, you wanted the guy who made All Is Lost, A Most Violent Year, and Margin Call to make your Craven movie. And if he was allowed to make and Triple Frontier is pretty much of a banger too. Make a good double feature with Land of Bad. But I'm just saying, why? Why? This is exactly what's wrong with all of Hollywood. You know, you blame the audiences, you blame the critics for the reasons you, people at the top, are not doing the work. And you're not hiring the creatives that should be doing the work. And when you do hire a creative, you don't let them do the work that made them the person you wanted to hire in the first place. It is crazy. It is crazy. And it all comes back down to people that don't care to figure out your jobs. My God, you would think if you're spending $75 million a pop, and let's face it, people are spending a lot more. We all read how much Andor costs. By the way, Andor's worth it. Do you know why? Because Andor has what's called a long tail. The long tail is a concept, you know, there's a book that came out called The Long Tail many years back. Good book, worth reading. Basically, I'll give you an example of what the long tail is. So let's say you have an electronic jukebox that has 10,000 songs in it. Over the course of a year, it turns out that every one of those 10,000 songs, now it's probably infinite with Spotify. This is like 10 years ago. But every one of those 10,000 songs will get played. And also, if you have something that sells like a popular album, like, I don't know, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Talk about a long tail. Things will sell like this first. Like, here are the sales figures. But if something is good, it will have what's called a long tail. It'll taper off, but then it'll sell forever. It might not do big numbers, but something with a long tail will sell forever. That's what a long tail is. Generations rediscover it. I mean, we don't have that much data. We've only got, decades of data, but it's a good bet. With all the reaction videos, I'm sure I'd love to know if YouTube and TikTok reaction videos have had an overall sales bump on catalog titles or movies. When Popcorn in Bed watches the Star Trek movies, does that mean more people go see Popcorn in Bed's review and then go watch? And you see that reviewer like Enjoy the Depeche Mode's Enjoy the Silence over the last couple of months has been rediscovered because now one person does a reaction, then all these other people have to do reaction videos, which is wild. So does that mean Enjoy the Silence gets played more on Spotify? I don't know. I don't know if anyone's done the research, but it's interesting. But I don't get while IP, which is driving Hollywood, why the people at the top are not required, the Quorum of 12 column, whatever, or why they don't have a fucking group of people, imagination connoisseurs, or people that actually wrote the comics like they used to have at Marvel, who could sit down and talk about why these characters, what the appeal of these characters are, or why making a Madam Web movie was never a good idea. It was never a good idea. And if you're just going to hang on to the rights, why not make a good movie? And remember, corporate thinking doesn't work. Just because you're making a Spider-Verse film or a Star Wars movie or a Star Trek movie, let's tell the origin of the Federation. Why? Why? Who thought that was a good idea? Because you're looking at other origin movies? Why do we only get Star Trek prequels? I don't know. Why don't people ever look and go, Star Trek was at its zenith in 1994. And what was going on in 94? Well, you had Next Generation ending. You had Deep Space Nine in its second season. You were about to launch Voyager on the UPN network. And you had the Next Generation going from the TV screen to the big screen in 1994. All Star Trek was moving forward. New characters, new universes. Not old characters, but Star Trek as an IP, it's moribund. I mean, my God, since 2009, let's go back and retell the story of Kirk and Spock so we can make our IP, Next Generation can love Star Trek all over again. Why do that? In what universe do people go back again and make prequels unless, of course, your universe is something that allows that to happen? I mean, everyone thinks that Star Trek can, but Star Trek was at its most successful moving forward. Our original crew, nobody said in 1979 when Star Trek The Motion Picture came out, or 82 or 84 or 86 that, we can't tell stories about our middle-aged crew anymore. No, you can, because moving forward gives our characters something new to do. Unless you fuck it up like in Force Awakens, but the same guy that went back and brought... Anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole, because you know me, you've heard these rants before. I'm just saying, people, if you're going to work in IP... and especially if you decide that you're going to make Spider-Verse movies, perhaps not make movies about spider villains who by definition are defined by their conflicts or interactions with Spider-Man himself. What brain trust came up with that idea? And if you're going to make a movie like Morbius and you want to make a vampire movie, make a fucking vampire movie. Don't be like, oh, no, it's going to get an R rating because there's too much blood in it. Yeah. You know what? An R rating really hampered the Deadpool franchise. Made no money, that franchise. Except Tim Miller. He only made $225,000 for directing it. Where's his residuals, buddy? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What do you guys have to say about this? What do you have to say? I don't know. Let's look into it. Let's find out. There's a lot of you here today. Thanks for being here. I hope you're having a good Boxing Day. Jay Bling says, well, it's a good thing the Sony CEO is leaving. Yes, Jay, but he's going to be replaced by this. It'll be the same as it ever was. But you're right. Ken Zakai says, East Coaster here, finally catching you live. Happy birthday. Thank you, Ken Zakai. A Loss for Words has been a member for 12 months. Thank you, sir. Royalston S. Bailey. Star Trek geeks are into lore. Ships. Nerds are into concepts. Picard's speeches. Every Trek fan falls somewhere in that spectrum. You don't have to fall in a spectrum when you're an imagination connoisseur, but you're right, Royston. That's true. Jared Snyder says, I got my copy of Seattle Samurai for Christmas. Thanks for the great interview with Kelly Goto. Jared, I'm going to send, you know what? I'm going to screen cap this and send it to her. Thanks for that. iCritic has been a member for 20 months and says, Tony's comments, iCritic says, Tony's comments on the quality of these films made me laugh hard. He should listen to True Noir to discover what a quality production looks like. Oh, that's the quickest way to my heart. As everyone knows, you heard a clip, if you saw the beginning of the show, of Michael Rosenbaum and, of course, Katie Sackhoff, who plays his fiancée, Janie Doherty, from True Noir. Look, as I've said, I'm laying it all out on the line. True Noir, I'm working with one of the best scripts I've ever read, which is Max Allan Collins' script, adapting his own novel, True Detective. He bequeathed those incredible efforts to me to create an audio drama that we went out and got a bespoke cast for. I went out and got my co-creator, Mike Bodden, along with Max Allan Collins. Mike Bodden, who was arranging for the financing, allowed me to go hire Christine Sheeks on as our supervising producer because she cast movies like Boogie Nights, and she and I went after the cast that I wanted to get. And with her many great suggestions, we were able to put together a cast of 25 actors. You might not know them by name, but you know them by face, that we have in True Noir. Everybody from Patton Oswalt to Bill Sadler to David Strathairn to, well, Katie Sackhoff and Chris Carr, if you watch the John Campea show, who holds her own against this star-studded cast. But you can get True Noir right now at truenoir.co. You can also see... we have some video pieces called "The History Behind the Mystery" with Max Allan Collins, and he will take you through every episode and explain the real history, because True Noir is a fusion of actual historical events with historical characters and our fictional detective Nathan Heller. As I've always said, the best fiction is the most truthful. Skiz Spivak, Esquire. And by the way, thanks for the compliment, iCritic. Skiz Spivak Esquire has gifted 5 Burnettwork memberships. Well, thank you very much. Bruce Lum for $20 Canadian says, Happy Hanukkah, Rob. I sent you 2 e-cards a couple of days ago, one for the holiday season and one with the menorah. I hope you checked them out. I did check. I didn't know you sent me 2. I did check one out, and thank you for that. I've never received an e-card like that, and thank you. That was very thoughtful. Eric O'Sullivan, Sully, says, but Rob, what are your feelings about Brad Pitt's 2019 Ad Astra as a great sci-fi adaptation of The Odyssey? I truly love the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I love Ad Astra. It's an imaginative retelling. It's okay. I didn't love it. I wanted to love it more. You know, and again, the Iliad and the Odyssey have had so many different interpretations, and I think, though, that there was a lot going on in Ad Astra, and I just didn't think it all entirely worked. But it's not bad. It's a lot better than the 3 Sony Spider-Verse movies we're talking about. Rebel Sky says, hey, Robert, Sire O'King, I have an idea. What do you think of once a year, a 12-hour stream? 4 a.m., us and your 1,000 episode was fun. Maybe we can put it into a pot monthly to pay for it. What do you think? Rebel Sky, I think what I got from this is that you want me to do 1,000 minutes. That was kind of actually, I got to tell you, the first, so everyone might, if you're new to the channel, I did, for my 1,000th episode, I did a 1,000-minute stream. I did have to break it into 2 streams, but I kept going because YouTube only lets you stream for 12 hours live at a time. But yeah, it was fun. The first 12 hours went by really quickly, and then I let more people in, and that was fun. You don't need to put money into a pot for me to do something like that, but it's just, I mean, right now I'm still got to get True Noir finished. Major Chai Chai says, happy Boxing Day, R&B. Also, happy birthday. You guys, this is 10 months of this happy birthday joke. People have been wishing me a happy birthday every single day, for the most part, for 10 months. Tom Jr. Jackson says, happy birthday, Robin. Happy Zombie Jesus Day. Well, Tom, I hope you had a good one, and your birthday was a couple days back, too. So I hope you had a good one, too. Tracy's here, a world in pajamas. And she says, just popped in to say happy holidays and all the best for the new year. Just back from staying with family and drinking a whiskey. Where's yours? You know what? We're a little, I spent all my money, all my extra money on it either is going to into True Noir or paying bills. So I am booze free. Not because I want to be. More of a financial issue. But thank you. I appreciate your interest. But, water. Been drinking a lot of water lately. Slim down. I want to get back into fighting weight. I want to get down. I weighed 195 in high school. I want to get down to 205. If I get down to 205, I got down to like 200 about 10 years ago, and I worked out with a trainer. I look good. I could do that again. A World in Pajamas also says, bought True Noir, listening to it tomorrow. If you want to get True Noir, you want to buy True Noir, you can buy it right now at truenoir.co. And I want to thank everybody for listening to it because, again, I put my heart and soul into True Noir. And if it's not good, and if you don't think it at least represents an attempt to take a long, sprawling, and, the first 3 episodes that you can hear now are kind of the opening. It's kind of, it is Act 1, but it's got 7 more episodes. So remember, we're just touching the story. But yeah, I am putting myself out there in addition to everything else I've worked on and saying, look, I got the author of the book to adapt his own novel, which is fantastic. And he did a phenomenal job. We got great actors as the director, and I've worked with all the actors and with Michael Rosenbaum. The way I went about it was Michael Rosenbaum and we recorded all of his narration first over 4 days. We were in a room, just him and I, working together. That guy, first of all, Michael Rosenbaum you can tell from the audio drama, but he's, not only is he a phenomenal actor, he's a very smart actor. And he really understands the text. And it was interesting because working with him, he's reading it, and especially like during his narration, he would read it and he's grasping the material and he's trying it different ways until he would figure out how he wanted. He's like, oh, let's do one more. And he would always do one more, and it was like letter perfect. And watching him, he didn't just give me 1 or 2 reads. He wanted it perfect until he felt it, and it was wild. He's so great to work with. It was such a joyous, and I'm not just saying that. I don't have to kiss Michael Rosenbaum's ass. He doesn't need me to kiss his ass, but he's an incredible actor. He's very intuitive, and you could tell that he's very empathetic if you watch his Inside of You podcast. Really, really good. As a matter of fact, all of the actors, for the most part, even Chris Carr, who hasn't had a lot of the experience as the other actors, everybody did a really great job. And you can hear it because every time a new actor comes in, they bring us a different kind of a character. And it was a joy. It was so much fun. It's one of my favorite things I've ever worked on. So REG says, REG is a new member of the channel. REG, welcome. You too are now an imagination connoisseur. Major Chai Chai says, on the subject of Star Trek, It's a deal regarding the Section 31 question. Oh, man. I have to do a Section 31 watch. I mean, I want to watch it. Look, I hope Section 31's great. I hope it's awesome. I hope it's the most wonderful Star Trek thing I've seen since, I don't know, In a Mirror Darkly, the In a Mirror Darkly two-parter from the last season of Enterprise. I hope. And even that had problems, but I still loved it. You go, Mike Sussman. You know how to write Star Trek. Brendan Lucas says, watching Popcorn in Bed's reaction to Nemesis is a vibe. I know, right? And she says, you people are too hard on movies. Plus, I know how she would react to Star Trek 09. Admitted Bad Robot hit their beats well. Yeah, I know. But here's the thing. She's not saddled with imagination connoisseur baggage. So what's interesting is to watch these things working on people years after the fact. And I think Popcorn in Bed, I think she has good taste, and I think she actually has good insight. But to me, she represents, normies. She's a woman that's watching these movies and wants to be entertained by them, and she's not so concerned with all the lore. She sees characters come back. She sees emotional beats. She's not going like, well, B4 is just copy a lore and blah, blah. So it's genuine. And for me, I've moved beyond. Remember, history is the great leveler. So I enjoy watching her reactions. Red French Moon has been a member for 10 months. Oscar Herrera says CEOs need to learn from Bob Iger. Let the creatives create and the business types be the wind behind their sails so they can give us or take us, so they can take us, the audience, on adventures. The problem is, here's the problem. The CEOs are looking at, they're making their decisions on corporate agendas. Are these people, do they have enough credits? Have they done this? Like, how do you hire J.C. Chandor and not let him write your movie? And look, J.C. Chandor JC's got to eat. I understand you take a big job, but now his career, a man who's incredibly, he's not like James Mangold. He doesn't bounce back from Indiana Jones, and make the Bob Dylan movie. You don't get to do that. Or maybe he will, because he's got a diversified portfolio. A Most Violent Year, All Is Lost, and Margin Call couldn't be more different. And he's worked with great actors in all three of those movies, including Robert Redford. I mean, All Is Lost is one dude on a sailboat. It's pretty impressive. So, Brendan Lucas says, the irony is that the Sony Spider-Verse film's screenplay quality is probably quite similar to the Sonic film's screenplay quality, but I've never seen a theater go more crazy watching Sonic 3. Well, here's the thing. The people that are making Sonic 3 knew what they were doing. Look at the fact that the people that made Sonic 3 responded to the trailer outcry that Sonic didn't look right, and they fucking changed it. Yeah. Let's talk about how the audience didn't. It's the audience's fault or the critics' fault. The audience spoke and they listened. That's the way to do it. Razorburn says, your opinion on Sid and Nancy from Alex Cox. I love Sid and Nancy. Sid and Nancy's a great movie. And how great is Gary Oldman in that movie? And it was it's so good. And look, I think Repo Man and look, in my youth, Repo Man and Sid and Nancy were must-see movies. Alex Cox then went on and made movies like Straight to Hell, which I didn't enjoy as much, but Sid and Nancy and I would say definitive films. Great, go for that Alex Cox double feature. Watch Repo Man and Sid and Nancy. They're very different movies, but they've got that, obviously, the punk thing in common. There's some DNA there. They're very different kinds of films, but great. Care About You wants to know if I have any new toys. I don't. I didn't get any new toys. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't. I got the shirt. Really like this shirt. People don't buy me toys, really. Because they know that I probably already have them all. So, or at least I can't expect people to buy me toys. People don't want to buy you, especially it's no fun for people to buy me toys. But I wish they would. But I didn't get any new toys. Oscar Herrera says, also, thank you for keeping me entertained as I did mind-numbing legal work. Hope you had great holiday and many blessings for 2025. Well, thank you very much. Verse says, hi, Rob. Happy holidays. Are these rumors true that Sony is considering returning Spider-Man to Disney Marvel? It seems far-fetched to me, but people have been talking since Craven Crash. Listen. Okay. I think no. I mean, remember, they're making a third. Why isn't the third Into the Spider-Verse movie deep into production or Beyond the Spider-Verse? I don't know. They're not going to give up. Remember, Sony is the distributor of this Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. And No Way Home, the last Spider-Man movie, made $2 billion. Marvel only got, 25% of that? 20% of that? I think they changed it and made it 25%. Sony still got 75%. They're not going to give up their golden goose. They're not going to give up the Spider-Man franchise because the Spider-Man movies are what makes the money. But I would say that, real money. What they've done, they've damaged their Spider-Man brand. There's still a Marvel logo in front of those films. And I would say they've really damaged, they've done a lot of damage to the Spider-Man franchise as a whole because, can you use Madam Web? Can you use Craven? And can you use Morbius the Living Vampire? It's kind of a bummer that you can't. And I'm sure frustrating. Which, it's too bad that they did that. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, my first experience with the Odyssey was the animated sci-fi series Ulysses 31. I've read it 3 times since then, and I look forward to the new adaptation. Me too. I'm really looking forward to it. Alexander Wilson, our old friend Alexander Wilson, says, by the way, I was told, Alexander, that during a certain sporting season that somebody is completely out of pocket for at least the entire season. So don't worry, I'm still on it. Speaking of Star Wars and Andor, Rob, you have to watch Skeleton Crew. The last episode was so good. Hats off to John Watts and Chris Ford. Those two know how to write a very good story. The last episode was almost Andor level quality. I've only watched the first episode, and I have to say I liked it. I did like it, and I'm going to be curious to see where it goes. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, I've thought of getting Dan Simmons' Ilium and Olympus for some time. After your recommendation, I might just order them. By the way, when is the next members chat? I think it's going to be this Saturday. I have to check with Roberto because I owe y'all one. But thank you for that. You really should. Ilium and Olympus are great. They're really great. They're big and they're sprawling and they're wild, man. They are wild. But so again, what I was saying is I don't think that Sony's going to get rid of Spider-Man. I really don't. Brendan Lucas says, I think the Sony execs sense there is an unfairness about their box office, and they're probably right. I'm on the fence about Nerdrotic, but I think he was right about Deadpool 3. It gave the audience permission to turn off. I don't know what he said about Deadpool 3. I was not a big fan. I actually, I love Deadpool 1. Loved it. And I really wanted to see, what I wanted to see was a combination of Deadpool 1 and Days of Future Past. But see, this is the trap we fall into as imagination connoisseurs. We might want something, and when we don't get that thing, we don't like it. For what it was, I thought Deadpool was fine. But I even think that it wasn't very clever in terms of its cameos. And I think they probably did have to appeal. Like, the jokes are all fine and well and all that. But the secret weapon about Deadpool 1 is it was a great combination of comedy, Deadpool's fourth wall breaking comedy. It was a great superhero and action movie. And it was also a romance. Ooh, see, that's when you win. And I think Deadpool and a lot of, I don't know if you've all read that story that Tim Miller only made $225,000 for. See, this is also how Hollywood works. They wanted to make Deadpool for $65 million and keep the price low. Now, Tim Miller, it was his first feature. Again, you got him for a price. But he came out. I don't know why he didn't direct Deadpool 2. He got the Terminator franchise. You never know. Hollywood politics. Maybe he clashed with Ryan Reynolds. I don't know. I met Tim Miller at the screening of Deadpool 1 at IMAX. And I went and saw it I was there with Rob Liefeld. I was there with John Schnepp. I was there with Frosty. And we all met Tim Miller, took a picture together. and loved it. And I thought Deadpool 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine, I wanted to see the combination of what Deadpool 1 did. I wanted to see more of that in Deadpool and Wolverine. There's a lot of clever stuff. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it, but at the end of the day, it was kind of a little trifle of a movie where I thought it could pack a real wallop. But that's what I wanted, and I never like to judge films on what I wanted to see. I try and judge movies for what they actually are. So, so I don't know what Gary said about Deadpool 3. I haven't watched that review, but I'm sure he's not wrong. Tracy, A World in Pajamas, says, I don't understand the hate for Nolan doing the Odyssey. Many stories, including Star Trek, were influenced from Homer's epic. It will probably be a trilogy. What is your drink when you are in town? Well, look, I love beer. I don't drink a lot of beer, but I love beer. I like to drink whenever I go somewhere. I always try and drink local hooch, local whiskeys, local. But, if I went to Ireland, I really like Kilkenny, the cream of Ireland. It's hard to find Kilkenny here in the States. I found it. It's made by Guinness. It's an offshoot of Guinness. I love Guinness. But give me great British beer, and then, whatever we're close to Ireland, so I'm a big fan of Irish whiskeys, preferably at the same time. Love having a double Jameson with a beer back, with a pint. Comes in pints. So that's what I like to drink. Yeah, I don't understand either. I've had people, like I said, tell me that, I'm surprised people don't know the Iliad and the Odyssey. Look, the fact that no one reads anymore is shocking to me. Or that never read in high school, but they're in Ivy League schools and they don't have the. I mean, I don't understand a world in which I have books stacked in the bathroom. I'm always reading something, or But anyway, what can you do? Kids today, right? Matthew Coulinod says, can you recommend some highbrow and gripping sci-fi and fantasy novel series along the lines of Game of Thrones? Well, it's not quite along the but if you weren't here earlier, today's recommendation are Dan Simmons, Ilium and Olympos. By the way, I get no money from I don't get any cash for recommending this stuff. I just love Dan Simmons. But in terms of Game of Thrones, I mean, Ian Banks' Culture series, Larry Niven's Known Space series, if you want to read those. It's not so much, it's when you say science fiction is very different than fantasy. Big sprawling epics. I mean, read Werner Vinge's A Fire Upon the Deep. If you want to read a fucking book that I still can't get over. Peter Watts' Blindside. I always recommend the same books. It seems like, but Werner Vinge's A Fire Upon the Deep, Peter Hamilton, Pandora's Star, Jesus Unchained. Peter Hamilton's Salvation series is one I read recently. There's 3 of them, and they were interesting. I don't know if they were better than, say, Pandora's Star. I don't know. But yeah, I did like those books. You know what books I really Stephen Baxter's Manifold series. They have nothing to do with Game of Thrones, but I'll tell you something. This was like 20 years ago. I want to say 20. Maybe it was during the holidays. I had bought Stephen Baxter's. There's 3 of them. There's Manifold Space, Manifold Time, and Manifold Origin. And Origin was, so check this out. I read Manifold Space in one sitting, like during one afternoon. I started in the morning and I read the whole book. And like in the afternoon, like by 5 p.m., I had the other. I had bought them and I hadn't read them. And then I didn't have Manifold Origin hadn't come out yet. But I read Manifold Space first, and then I just dove right in to Manifold Time. Stephen Baxter's Manifold series. I didn't love Manifold Origin as much, but those books were dope. Manifold Space and Manifold Time were so good. And there's intelligent octopi in those books. Have you read the Zeely Sequence series? Yes, I have. Not all of it. I have because there's a lot of it. There's a lot of the Zeely series. I've read some of the Zeely series. I think I want to say I have, where is it? I have a lot of it, but I don't think I have all of it. I'd have to look into that. But that was one of those things you fall into, and then you have to like find like the different things, because there's short stories and novellas, but that's another great series of books. So, or series of not just books but stories too. Let's see. Alexander Wilson says, Alex Sherman of CNBC, there's an anonymous survey by Power Media members for their 2025 predictions is out. Can you read and react to it? Because there were some predictions that will raise your eyebrows. Well, hang on. Okay. Let me look that up. I don't know what that is. Let's look it up. Alexander Wilson always has interesting things to look at. So let's see what Alex Sherman. Let's see this. Okay, here we go. This is CNBC. Oh, okay. This is interesting. Alexander Wilson, I will go down this rabbit hole with you. So, as asked by Alexander Wilson, Alex Sherman. This was updated on December 23rd. And several media executives expect big transitions from Comcast and Warner Brothers Discovery. Other executives focused on Donald Trump's regulatory administration loosening rules for TV broadcast affiliates to consolidate. And two executives predicted who will and won't be considered to take over for Bob Iger. Ho, 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 it's a holiday tradition. Anonymous media executives make their 2025 industry predictions. In honor of the 12 days of Christmas, we give you 12 predictions from some of the most powerful media and entertainment executives in the world, weighing in on the conditions of anonymity so they can speak candidly about their visions of the year ahead. And then, because we have holiday cheer, we give you a bonus one, a baker's dozen. Well, let me read this. While Warner Brothers Discovery, Max, Netflix, and Disney didn't all team up for the first significant streaming bundle, as one participant predicted last year, Max and Disney did join forces. TV broadcast station groups continued to pick off regional sports rights, as another executive anticipated. Redbird Capital didn't quite acquire Paramount Global, but the private equity firm was part of the consortium with Skydance that announced a merger with the company in July. As for other 2024 predictions, Nelson Peltz and Jay Rizzullo did not win their activist campaign to join the Disney board. Disney CEO Bob Iger did not renew his contract beyond 2026. Buy Candle Media or name Dana Walden his successor, and NBA media rights did not go to Disney, Warner Brothers Discovery, and Apple. They went to Disney, NBC Universal, and Amazon. Oh, and one more miss. While Comcast did announce a spinoff of most of its cable networks, it did not spin off NBC Universal and merge it with Warner Brothers Discovery. That's a nice segue to here's what these predictions are for the year. Executive 1. Comcast will acquire the studio and streaming assets of Warner Brothers Discovery and merge them with NBC Universal. Ooh. Second time's the charm. Warner Brothers Discovery is separating its linear assets from the rest of the company. Comcast is spinning out most of its cable networks. It has to mean something, right? Gosh, I hope not. I really don't want Warner Brothers. I don't think we need to have giant conglomerations of studios. I think Disney buying Fox. I'm hoping that Steve Asbell, the president of 20th Century Studios, can strike out more on his own. I thought he had a pretty good year this year with First Omen, even though it wasn't huge at the box office, didn't cost a lot. War of the Planet of the Apes cost $30 million more than the Planet of the Apes film, than Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And then, of course, we had Alien Romulus, which did well, which was not made. It was not hugely expensive. And now they're starting to make more and more new things. The Predator franchise is doing well. I hope Steve gets to make more unique films. But my God, the less big studios we have, the better. Warner Brothers, I hope I hope it stays the same. The problem is none of these guys give a fuck about movies. It's all about money and mergers and all this shit. Mergers and acquisitions. So I hope not. Comcast, Executive 2 says Comcast will acquire Charter and spin off the rest of NBC Universal. Maybe. That's right, Comcast may have SpinCo 1 and SpinCo 2. This executive predicts Comcast will test the Donald Trump regulatory administration and try and combine the two largest U.S. cable companies 10 years after dropping its bid to buy Time Warner Cable. See, I'm not so up on all this stuff, so I can't really opine on it. Maybe. Fox will acquire most of Warner Brothers Discovery's assets. After selling the majority of its entertainment assets to Disney in 2019, Fox will shock the media world by again gaining scale, acquiring HBO, the movie studio, the Turner Networks, and the streaming assets of Warner Brothers Discovery, according to this executive. For what it's worth, another executive predicted Fox would sell, given the unknown future of the Murdoch Family Trust. Maybe that would mean Fox, after selling 20th Century Studios, would acquire Warner Brothers and become Fox Warner Brothers? I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen. Dana Walden will leave Disney at the year end when she doesn't get the CEO job. Maybe. I don't know. Jeff Bezos will be bullied into selling the Washington Post after President Trump makes it clear his space company Blue Origin will suffer for his paper's coverage. I could see that happening. Blue Origin needs government to let him launch rockets. I could see that happening. But that would be a blow to the free press, which I hope doesn't happen. Several TV station groups will sell out of financial hardships. I totally agree with that. Probably. Traditional old school TV is just the world has gone streaming. The world is broadcast. I mean, look, if we have a big a war, nuclear conflagration or something like that, streaming's going to go down. It'd be nice to have broadcast television still around. I don't think for matters of national security, we should let broadcast TV disappear. Executive 7, the Trump administration relaxes TV station ownership rules, leading CBS, ABC, NBC, and Fox to buying up their own affiliate stations. I could see that. That might happen. Maybe. Executive 8 says Paramount Global will acquire Lionsgate after it spins off from Starz. Maybe. Although Lionsgate is kind of its own thing. Maybe. But Lionsgate, I mean, I know they've tried to sell it before, but we'll see where Lionsgate goes. I mean, I think Lionsgate is great for what it does. Full disclosure, I've been doing some work for Lionsgate Limited, which you should all go to. They're selling the Quentin Tarantino steelbooks if you want the 4Ks, and they did new transfers of Kill Bill 1 and 2. Executive 9, a big tech company will acquire video game maker Electronic Arts. Look, do I think that that's a good thing? No. I think that EA, it's in the game. Didn't EA do the SSX franchise? If game companies like movie studios are acquired by bigger and bigger corporations, it's not good for the product. The whole reason that anybody wants to acquire these companies is because they've made money and made great games. And as soon as they get bought by a bigger company, then there's somebody above them. If they need an infusion of cash, I get it. But what you're doing is you're getting the creativity that creates this is the irony. The creativity that makes the very thing that makes these companies valuable is what these other companies want to acquire to increase their profits. But by doing that, the company that made the thing that you want to acquire no longer has the autonomy to do it. So it's a circle that I don't think works. Maybe sometimes it can, but Executive 8 says the M&A hype around the industry will be wildly overblown, and there will be far fewer deals than anyone thinks, meaning mergers and acquisitions. You're all wrong. This executive says mergers and acquisitions predictions generally won't come true because consolidation won't provide any real fixes to an industry in transition. That I agree with. For the very reason I just stated. That I totally agree with. Executive 11 says Paramount Plus, Peacock, and Max get bundled together. That could happen. I could see that bundle happening. Why not? Maybe. Executive 12, the sports streaming service Venu will never launch, and Fox will license its sports content to ESPN for a streaming service. That could happen. I could see that happening. Why not? And then finally, the third one. Executive 13 says Kathleen Kennedy will depart Lucasfilm. Kennedy has been the president of Disney's Lucasfilm since 2012 and is now in her 70s. It may be time for a new leader of the Star Wars franchise. May the Force be with you. Let's see what 2025 brings. Happy holidays. All right, Alexander, all those are interesting predictions. I would say this. Look, do I want to be one of those people that says Kathleen Kennedy needs to leave? Look, it's not her fault. I don't think it's her fault. Kathleen Kennedy produced our childhoods. The problem is, like so many have said, she's not somebody that loved Star Wars. You know, she's worked with all these people, but what Star Wars needs is one guy or one girl at the top, one person at the top, and it's not somebody like Dave Filoni. You need somebody outside of Star Wars that loves Star Wars, but that isn't in their, you know, keeper of the flame. You need somebody that really understands. The thing about Dave Filoni and all these guys, they know Star Wars, but they also have to understand that the reason Star Wars succeeded initially was because George Lucas was looking at things like Kurosawa. Star Wars has become only about itself. I think that Skeleton Crew was the first episode was about the universe, and from what I saw of that first episode, I was intrigued enough to be like, okay. But somebody needs to understand all of Star Wars. They need to know about the extended universe. They need to know about the novels. They need to know all these things and think, okay, why would it be a great idea to make a Knights of the Old Republic series or series of movies, and why should we do it right now? It's already all laid out for you. Let's get some people that want to do it. But yeah, I think that's what Star Wars needs. That's what all the great IPs need. The problem is, and here's the problem, it's always going to be the problem, anybody that truly loves Star Wars as a creative that might be the best person for it is never going to be approved to take over that position by their corporate overlords, because on a spreadsheet, what they know and why they would be good for Star Wars is not on the spreadsheet. Maybe not an Ivy League education, maybe no business degree. You never know. That's the problem. Corporations are diametrically opposed to getting in business with people that would be the best thing for storytelling. It's a very hard place to go. It's a very hard place to go. What you need is a producer who has great taste in material, that understands, look, great taste in material spans all genres. You know, you don't just need somebody, I would dare say you don't necessarily need somebody that knows Star Wars. You need somebody that understands great storytelling and great material. That's what Star Wars needs. Kathleen Kennedy was a great producer of movies when she was working with visionaries. She was great to be like, okay, visionaries, I'm going to keep you on the up and up. We're going to get what you need. What do you need? Let me help you facilitate your vision. But when Kathleen Kennedy is in a place where the people with the vision are subordinate to her, that's problematic. And that's what we saw over and over and over again. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm really interested in seeing what Lord Miller's vision of Solo would have looked like. I don't know. But it was interesting. That was interesting, Alexander Wilson. Nathan Lip says, will you be going back to the John Campea show anytime soon? Well, I'm still working on True Noir, which I'm 3 months late, to be honest, because we had no lead. It took us a long time to find a lead actor. I did say to John that I was going to be available. It's really up to him. I know he wants to he's talking about retiring and all that. For me, it's for me to be on the John Campea show is an hour and a half of my day just in driving. If I could go in remotely, it'd be much easier for me, but I understand John likes it better when we're all in the same studio because the energy, it makes, I think he's right, it makes the show better. But I wouldn't mind, you know. World in Pajamas says, when I go to the pub, two elderly gentlemen in their 80s always buy me a pint. My family is Irish, and my mom's auntie died in a pub drinking stout. That's the way to go. Brendan Lucas, who asked about the Zeeley series, says, I like the weird emotional beats in the Zeeley series. We are fighting a genocidal war against you. Who are you? That's true. That's funny. Verse says, could the Marvel versus DC toxicity from the DCEU return? Content creators shifted from Doom to Superman since the teaser. Fans bet on July's winner. Collider calls Downey Evans' return a betrayal. Thoughts? Okay. Good question. How should I put this? Let's just say, before they announced Robert Downey as Dr. Doom, I would say 6 months before that was announced, I was told about it. Let's just say I was told about it. Let's just leave it at that. And I was surprised, but the person that I was having this discussion with, we had a long talk about it. And there are ways, I think, let's just say there are ways I was convinced at the time of the conversation that I was having that it could be really cool. And as for betrayal, look, here's the thing. If the story is good, and for like someone's gonna be betrayed that somebody in a comic book story comes back to life. Since when? I mean, if you want to do it in with the multiverse, we know the Fantastic Four doesn't even begin in the 616 universe. So, I mean, think about it this way. Instead of Victor Von Doom, what if you had a story that of a Tony Stark? What if it we know of Doctor Doom as being Victor Von Doom? Well, what if there's a way, like in my mind, I could see a character like Tony Stark, and I did a whole show about this, that Tony Stark's Tony Stark, and Tony Stark breaks bad. And Tony Stark starts talking about, putting a suit of armor around the world. Well, what if he did that by force? Or what if he wanted to change the world into his own image? What if Iron Man 1 didn't happen and Tony Stark became a bit of a megalomaniac, and instead of creating the Iron Man suit, created a Doctor Doom suit and was wielding magic and technology? Who knows? I mean, there's a way to do it and have it be great. As I said, you're one movie away from your franchise being returned to greatness. And they've got Marcus and McFeely coming back, who wrote those Captain America movies and wrote the Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. You got Marcus and McFeely coming back working with the Russo brothers. That was a great heady mix. So to me, I don't think it's a betrayal. I think what's a betrayal is having movies made like Madam Web, Morbius, and Craven, and not picking the right people, or when you do have a J.C. Chandor, not letting him write and direct the film. You bring on an auteurist director and you don't let him be an auteur. That was dumb. So I don't think it. Look, I don't have a feeling. I don't find. To me, it's not so much a betrayal as it is bad business. I mean, you've got people at the top that just don't know, because it's not like the days of yore where Alan Ladd could go, I think we're gonna bet on this Lucas kid to make Star Wars. We're gonna bet on him. Universal, as I've said, obviously, because I use these as examples all the time. American Graffiti gets made for less than $1 million, makes over $150 million for Universal. You'd think that you'd give George Lucas, you'd back up the Brinks truck and say, "What do you want to make, kid?" "Oh, I want to do I can't get the rights to Star Wars, so I want to do a space movie, like for kids based on serials." Although it wasn't for kids at the time, and Universal said no. Alan Ladd Jr. said, "Let's give it a shot." You need people at the top that know. The problem is now we live in a world where they don't know. One of the great books, if you love movies, if you love Hollywood, you want to have some insight, even though it's outdated and the references are outdated, what's in the book is the same. Read William Goldman's book, Adventures in the Screen Trade. William Goldman wrote the novel and the screenplay for The Princess Bride. He wrote things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Read his book. And in that book, he delivers a very famous phrase, which is, nobody in Hollywood knows anything, which is still true today. I would say, I would change it. I would amend that to, people in Hollywood know less than nothing. Nobody in Hollywood knows anything. Why? Because they haven't done the work. They haven't read enough. They haven't watched enough. So all they're doing is looking at analytics. Unless somebody else has done something first, they are paralyzed. They don't know what to do. Why? Because movies are too expensive, so you can't put yourself out there, because if you fail, you're done. So, I would say, does J.C. Chandor have to go into director's jail? I hope not. I hope J.C. Chandor has a James Mangold biopic about Bob Dylan or something along those lines. I don't really mean literally make a Bob Dylan biopic. But, I don't think that James Mangold is necessarily blamed for Indiana Jones. But, and look, to be fair, Indiana Jones is not a terrible movie. I don't think Dial of Destiny is a terrible movie. It's just, it was wrong-headed in the sense that the character of Indiana Jones was a sad sack. As I've said, you could change the tenor and pallor of that entire movie Indiana Jones should have been fucking Gandalf. And what I mean by that, instead of being this guy who was gruff and my child died in Vietnam, Indiana Jones should have been the fucking Timothy Leary of archaeologists. If you're fucking Indiana Jones and you've seen the Ark of the Covenant, well, you didn't open your eyes, but you saw the results of what the Ark of the Covenant did when it was opened. You've seen the Sankara stones. You've watched an immortal knight save your father, give you the Holy Grail so you can save your fucking father. Let's just say Indiana Jones has seen a lot of stuff. I would say that would make him at 75 years of age. He should have had a long beard, and he should have been the most popular teacher around, talking about all kinds of crazy shit. And he said, kids, I'm not going to tell you not to take drugs. He should have been if they had made Indiana Jones Timothy fucking Leary, and he was on a whole different trip in that movie. I understand why they did it. I understand why but you turn Indiana Jones into a character that no longer likes himself. Indiana Jones should have been the most self-actualized dude on the planet. Carlos Castaneda, Yaqui Way of Knowledge, all the way down the road. He should have been like, and all the students should have loved him. The girls blinking, they still loved him at 75 years old. I mean, because they'd probably think he's into tantric sex and could blow their fucking minds. It should have been that way. And go the other direction. I am never late, class. I'm an archaeologist. Time has no meaning to me. Or something like that. Made it fun. Because Indiana Jones is a badass. But now, why do they do that? Because it's a cliche where a burnt-out character at the end of his life needs redemption. That was a mistake. You got to turn Indiana Jones into a badass. And it should have started. No, don't get me into it. I can't relitigate these kinds of things. What can I do? So, it's easy to say this stuff, but I can't be right all the time. A World in Pajamas says, if you're in the UK in the future, we will take you to some good bars with lots of music. Count me in. Count me in. Brendan Lucas says, it's ironic that American economic success in the last decade has produced so much corporatism and massive mergers, relative success per capita. It is ironic because, look, everybody wants a ton of money. I get it. But you've got a small amount of people that are benefiting from all this, which I don't think is great for capitalism. I believe in the free market. The problem is when what you want is wealth spread out amongst the economy to increase innovation amongst everybody. We want to be the great innovators. When a small group of people own most of the wealth, it never works out well. History tells us that. And it's just bigger and bigger corporate mergers, Wall Street. I get it. I understand where it comes from, but let them eat cake. It ain't going to end well. Brendan Lucas says, I think it's her fault. She was casting directors at luncheons. Say what you want about Harv Bennett, but he watched everything, and he was no Trek fan. No, I mean, look, you had executives like Harv Bennett whose job was to make television. And he made all kinds of great television. He made genre television. He made meat and potatoes television. What he understood was how a story works. He understood how to tell a great story. And he was brought on to bring down the costs of Star Trek because the motion picture costs, well, everyone says $44 million. The thing is about that, it's kind of a misnomer because they rolled in the development costs of both the Star Trek Phase 2 TV series that never got made and the Star Trek Planet of the Titans movie that also never got made. But it was also kind of a production disaster. The thing about people in television, they know how to make things fast. An episode of TV gets shot in 8 days. So that's what Harv Bennett was brought on to do, and it worked. 200 Watt Studio says, Rob, I've been out of the new Trek loop. Consider yourself lucky. Can you explain if Discovery has been decanonized or is it just wishful thinking? Okay. Star Trek Discovery has not been decanonized. Star Trek's Lower Decks took shots at Discovery all the time, and they did have a scene where they were being very cheeky in Star Trek Lower Decks, and they did draw a line saying that Star Trek Discovery could possibly be decanonized or belongs in a different universe, or it is in a different universe. But that's one thing. It's Paramount that has to say, look, in my mind, Star Trek Discovery decanonized itself. First of all, when Brian Fuller was put out to pasture, he was making a show. I don't know if I would have agreed with everything Brian Fuller would have done, but he certainly wouldn't have given us monumentally stupid shit like a spore drive. The mycellular network was incorporated into his original conception of the show as a terraforming device, and it was really interesting. But yeah, and they had to come in and make it all theirs. Again, the people that made Star Trek Discovery they did a lot of fantastical shit because, well, they didn't read enough science fiction. They just made up weird shit like the mycellular network. And it's unfortunate because even what was the I forget what's the name of the creature? Anyway, that was going to be a crew member like Chewbacca, Efrain, but yeah, just not good. It wasn't good, but it hasn't really been decanonized. Of course, I don't see Discovery. I don't think any Star Trek in my mind, including Lower Decks, including Strange New Worlds especially, they all are not part of canon because they didn't make any effort to be a part of canon. They've just decided to rewrite canon in a stupid effort to try and bring new fans into it. But you know what brought new fans into Star Trek? These new shows have not created a bunch of new Star Trek fans. You know what did? Star Trek The Next Generation. How did it do it? By moving forward almost 100 years and giving us a brand new cast of characters that were very different from our original cast of characters. That's what they should have done. And that were credible. I mean, we now keep getting ships of... and by the way, Star Trek is about a meritocracy. Whatever happened to excellence, in knowing what you want to do. Jose Antonio Romo as a new member. Well, thank you, Jose. 1001 Johnny says, I saw Nosferatu opening night Christmas Eve. Would you believe me if I said it was full of Christmas spirit? Of course I would. I believe everything you say to me. 200 Watt Studio said, I have to say, I just watched The Apartment last night. One of the most perfect films I've ever seen. You're not talking about the French Apartment that they based Wicker Park on. You're talking about the Shirley MacLaine Apartment. And you are correct. It is one of the greatest movies ever. So good. I believe it won Best Picture. What, in 1960? Wasn't The Apartment Best Picture? Such a good movie. Brendan Lucas says the Star Wars IP runner should be someone who finds themselves watching a Let's Play of Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 at 3 a.m. and wanting to drink. Maybe. That doesn't mean they're going to be a great executive, though. You need both. Devin Hilton says, I miss the 90s. Bring them back. It was our peak as a society and in film and music. Ooh, I don't know, man. I don't know. There's a lot of different peaks. I mean, usually they say the great eras of Hollywood were the 40s and the 70s. But the 90s, maybe. The 80s were pretty good, too, in terms of peak pop culture. Louis Feliciano says, Rob, here we are 3 months away from Alto Nights starring Robert De Niro. No trailer or marketing. I'm really excited because it's written by Nicholas Pileggi. Do you know what might be going on? I don't. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It might not have the big budget of marketing. They might be waiting. Marketing is kind of change. But I don't know if Nicholas Pileggi, that gives me hope. I hope it's good. I would love to see that. But don't fret when you haven't seen a trailer, because not all movies drop their trailers 6 months in advance. Usually big, high profile, expensive movies drop their trailers far in advance. But I wouldn't worry yet. Brendan Lucas says, didn't Lower Decks decanonize the 24th century by making it a goofy cartoon and taking all the seriousness out of the Next Generation Starfleet? Yes. Yes, it did. Lower Decks did. I mean, look, there is a streak in all imagination connoisseurs. We love our parodies. We love our funny stuff. And yes, Lower Decks did tell, if you stripped out all the comedy, it did tell some interesting stories. But I would dare say that one of the biggest problems that Star Trek has been facing in the modern age is people don't take it seriously. All of Star Trek, all of the original series has become a joke. I love that people are rediscovering it, like people like Popcorn in Bed or other channels, especially channels that are run by women. I love watching women go back and discover Star Trek because they watch it on its own terms. I've often said Star Trek doesn't need me to defend itself. Our IPs don't need to be defended against anything because they already established, history has already proved that they were good or great. But that's why I like watching female channels, women that go back and watch the original series specifically, because they're not thinking about necessarily the lore. They're watching the characters and the story. In a way, their opinions are very pure. And while they don't have to like what I like, I think they accept more at face value. Whereas we hardcore imagination connoisseurs are looking at the effects or looking at the colors or looking at the set design. It's a different thing. Like I'm a big home theater aficionado. I love the way things look. I love how they sound. But, like women and men are different. Women love to sing along to the lyrics of songs. I even made a joke about it in my movie, Free Enterprise. Men are looking for the overall impact of a song. We know the lyrics, but we want to, give us prog rock and we'll fucking rock out. You're listening to Rick Wakeman doing a keyboard solo for 9 minutes. It's awesome. We're just different. We should celebrate those differences, and we like things in different ways, which is great. That's why it's great to be an imagination connoisseur. That's why you can't say to somebody, well, you're not a true fan. People like things in different ways. And I think the way people like things, you should take that into consideration, which I think is good. So you can't decanonize something that was made. You can just say it's stupid, but it's getting to the point where I just don't. The real problem is part of my fandom always came in reading the Star Trek, like Okuda's beautiful slipcase encyclopedia. And what's happened to things like Star Trek Online and the Star Trek Encyclopedia and reference books is they've had to shoehorn in all of this gobbledygook. And they're trying to figure out don't tell me if I'm watching Star Trek from the time I was a little kid, I watched it for the better part of 50 years, that you're going to tell me that the character of Spock as portrayed in Discovery and Strange New Worlds is even remotely the same character as the Spock in the original series, because I know it's not. And why do I know? Why do I know it's not? Because they did things like they had Dr. Mbenga give Spock his harp, his lute or whatever to play, and told him maybe to help your anxiety, learn how to play music. Well, that's a fundamental, that's absolutely wrong. Spock read music. He played music that was established in the original series, but the people making modern Star Trek, they haven't watched all Star Trek. They don't know. They just read BuzzFeed articles. Here are the top 10 episodes, and then they go watch those. They don't know that Spock could sight read music because they never saw the episode Requiem for Methuselah. So all of modern Star Trek, all Star Trek since 2009 is not part of Star Trek canon. And the more they have to pollute it, just say it's in a different universe all itself. It is to anyone else who's intelligent. And then all these people come at me that like it and go, it is. Okay, that's because they haven't watched the original series either. So it's all very interesting. 1001 Johnny says, I already got that one. I did that. I already read 2001 Studios. I think I'm caught up. 200 Watt Studio says, how about this? Indy 5 starts with Indy and Marion living their best retirement life and happy together. Then Basil's daughter shows up wanting Indy's help to find her dad's life work that is missing. That could be good too. Marion protests at first, but relents, realizing Indy has to do it because that's who he is, and she hands him his whip. That would have been great too. That makes sense. Brendan Lucas says, I hope you didn't have a second article to read. I did not. I only had one article to read today. That's it. And I think it's given me enough fodder for this show, and I want to thank you for that. So no second article to read. But I appreciate you asking, because sometimes and Alexander Wilson says if Missed my earlier super chat about Sony's overall box office performance. Let me see. Did I? I read your Skeleton Crew thing. I'm looking. I don't see any super chat about or a tip about Sony's box office performance. It didn't come through. I don't see it. Other than it was the thing that you asked about. Sometimes tips don't come through. It's weird. Brendan Lucas says, well, I think Strange New Worlds thinks Spock has social anxiety and doesn't understand social cues, but I think I understood them fine in TOS. Well, that's a weird, this is another bizarre thing that happens. Like, I think you're absolutely right. I think that the people that watch Star Trek do not understand. They think that Spock does have social cues, that miscues, that he's basically autistic or can't understand people. It's very difficult to get what the character of Spock really is. And I understand because everyone's trying to apply things. Nowadays, we're all trying to make we're trying to allow for everybody's, whether you're neurodivergent. Spock is not neurodivergent. Spock is not autistic. Spock does not have problems understanding humans. That's why when he's not fucking Data, he's not. Spock is incredibly intelligent. He left the Vulcan Science Academy to go to Starfleet. Spock is a keen observer of human behavior. As a matter of fact, the only thing is Spock is a Vulcan. He has emotions. Let's get this straight, people. Vulcans have emotions. And if you suddenly got turned into a Vulcan, you would be the exact same person that you are today. You would just be in a Vulcan. The physiology would be different. You'd be physically stronger. You'd probably have a higher tolerance to heat. You wouldn't suddenly start thinking or talking like a Vulcan. That is learned behavior, which the people apparently on writing Star Trek don't understand. Vulcans are just as passionate as human beings are. They've just learned to control those emotions. They applied the teachings of Surak, and that's why they are who they are. They teach themselves mental discipline. Spock understands humor. Savik might say humor is a difficult concept in Star Trek 2. Spock gets it. He needles Dr. McCoy and gives Kirk shit the entire duration of the original series. Ah, yes, one of your human emotions. Spock has to be the best in both worlds. And that's something that is fundamentally misunderstood because it's hard for people. People think that if you're really, really smart, like that's a problem. It's some kind of an elite thing. No, Star Trek was a meritocracy. If you're going to be out on the final frontier, you have to be in the top 0.5% of excellent people in the universe. That's why the crew of Discovery, I didn't believe them for a second. I don't believe half the crew on Strange New Worlds. I don't think that any of those people have necessarily any discipline. It's a fucking workplace comedy because the people writing it don't understand what that kind of excellence means. They don't understand what meritocracy, they don't understand what it's like to have to be in a military situation, which is incredibly frustrating to watch. Brendan Lucas goes on to say, well, I think Strange New Worlds thinks... I read that and doesn't understand. You're probably right. 200 Watt Studio says, I didn't know that you could distill a culture and race into a hypo spray, like when the Enterprise crew became instant Vulcans. Yeah, we're seeing that. That's the stupidest thing ever. Brendan Lucas says, Spock gets the joke. He's just working out if it's worth laughing at. That is a very good point. And look, again, this is my problem with modern writing. Like how I started this show, how I talked about one of the things that I think is really lost with people that are writing, especially television, not all. When you watch shows like Mad Men or you watch shows like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, a lot of what's going on, you can see that the writers of those shows, whether it's Matthew Weiner and his writing staff or Vince Gilligan and his writing staff, you can see that there's an educational level of the people that are writing these shows. Like I began, they understand a lot of the canon of what Western literature came from. They get it. They get it all. What I'm seeing and what I've pointed out is that a lot of call it journeyman writers, they grew up only watching TV. They don't have a literary background. So they think that Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, the Joss Whedon school of writing, Firefly, Dollhouse, They think that's the way you can write, or that's the only way to write. You have to make that thing happening between all the characters. You can't write a show that has credible military decorum. And then you'll defend the fact, well, Gene Roddenberry wasn't making a military show. Really? Why does everybody have a rank? It might not. It's a quasi-military environment. Starfleet is Starfleet. It is what it is. The problem with Strange New Worlds is yeah, we'll listen to your orders maybe. On Discovery, I felt like you had a ship full of idiots that didn't know how to do anything. And then Michael Burnham was, as many people say, the bestest ever. But that was a problem. She was not a credible character. She commits mutiny. You could have, what I thought Star Trek Discovery was going to be about, and it would have been a great show, is if Michael Burnham, somebody asked me this yesterday, if you could make Star Trek Discovery any kind of a show you wanted it to be, I would say that Michael Burnham, as we see, in the Vulcan Hello, or the Klingon Vulcan Hello, when she starts a war and basically commits mutiny and gets drummed out of Starfleet, it would have been very interesting to do a character study of somebody like Michael Burnham, who is completely discredited, who has completely lost everything that she ever worked for, and how she starts from that demoralized, beaten down position and works her way back up through the ranks during the time of the Federation and Starfleet's great expansion, which could have been a really fascinating backdrop, and watched her earn her way back into Starfleet. Instead of just putting her in the captain's chair and making her this perfect person, it was very uninteresting. You could have taken this character, taken away everything she had, and spent the seasons watching her build herself back up and get back on. And the end of the show was about her sitting in the captain's chair and earning it back and watch that journey. Of course, that would have been a very difficult thing to write, but instead, everybody decided to make that show the way they made that show, and it was, Sonequa Martin Green is a talented actress. She was given horrible scripts to play, and she's a beautiful woman, and she deserved better. And they could have made a really interesting character out of her. And watching her, she'd already made terrible mistakes, and she's at the bottom. And the whole show was, you could have explored the universe, the Star Trek universe, the way we'd never seen it before, outside of Starfleet, and she wants to get back in. And that was all her journey. And if I would have pitched that idea, I would have said it's Arya Stark after she escaped King's Landing after her father was killed. And it's about, I wouldn't equate it to exactly Arya Stark's journey, but it's kind of like she was ostracized or she escaped, and it was all about coming back together, and she finally makes it back to where her family is and kills the Night's King. That kind of a journey, but through the Star Trek universe, the way we've never seen it before. That would have been an interesting and compelling show, and one I would have liked to have watched. Brendan Lucas says, I think even Star Trek 09 got Spock better. Maybe, but not much better. When he's like attacking Kirk on the bridge of the Enterprise because his mommy died. No, that's the thing. When Spock's mother dies is when he would keep it together the most. And it would be somebody like McCoy saying to Spock, listen, it's okay. Your human mother died. It's okay that you grieve for her in a human way. That's what she would have wanted. And they could have made a great scene out of it. And Spock could have, I'm not saying he's going to shed a tear necessarily. But can you imagine what kind of a scene that could have been? Let Zachary Quinto. By the way, Zachary Quinto he was one of the producers of Margin Call, got it made. He was great in that one scene I tell everybody to watch. Zachary Quinto, Kevin Spacey, Demi Moore, although she doesn't say anything really, and Jeremy Irons in J.C. Chandor's Margin Call. Check it out. Toronto Watch Studio says Kirk was one of the most read characters. He was reading Spock's gift at the end of Star Trek II. He couldn't finish it because he was so devastated. Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds can't even rip off Balance of Terror correctly. Ugh. Darth Plato says, I'm here. Let's start the show over. Well, Darth Plato, that's the beauty of YouTube. You can choose to start it over if you want. 200 Watt Studio says, Strange New Worlds would have asked Book. What is Book? Good reference. Good reference to Spock's brain. Nicely done. Well, listen, everyone. I think I'm going to end this show. I thought, I said my piece. This was what a great interactive show. What a great audience you are. Once again, I'm going to shamelessly shill for my new project, True Noir, The Assassination of Anton Cermak, based on Max Allan Collins' novel True Detective. I created the series with Mike Bodden and Max Allan Collins and myself. Hopefully we can do more, but it is a fully immersive 10-chapter audio drama, of which the first act, chapters 1, 2, and 3, are available. And in the first couple of chapters, you meet Katie Sackhoff's Janie Doherty. You have Bill Smitrovich, who was actually in the Star Trek episode, or the Deep Space Nine two-parter past tense. He was also one of the stars of Crime Story. And he's a big Michael Mann acolyte, but he's been in a million different things. William Sadler, who played Sloan on Deep Space Nine, but he was also Death in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And, of course, he was in The Shawshank Redemption. He was in Trespass, if you remember that. He was the villain in Die Hard 2. His wife just passed away. He also starred as Wilson Wyler Kincannon in a horror film I produced called The Hills Run Red. He's in it. Don McManus, who was actually one of my favorite West Wing episodes, Two Cathedrals. So you go, Don McManus. He plays actor George Raft. Of course, P.J. Byrne, who's in the upcoming TV series of The Rainmaker, based on, of course, the League. Why am I drawing a blank? There's so many people's names. The guy who Pelican Brief, Time to Kill. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? Anyway, a lot of great actors are in. C. Thomas Howell. Jesse Spencer plays Elliot Ness. So go to True Noir, TRUENOIR.co. And if nothing else, if you hate my guts and you want to complain and bitch about something I made, go to that. I did direct it, I did edit it, and I co-created it. So if you want to complain, but I'm telling you, it's a great ride. If you like audio dramas, you can either get the 2-channel stereo mix, or you can get the 5.1 mix for your home theater, or if you have 5.1 equipped headphones or a soundbar or things like that, and it's easy to play, go there. And also look out for the Max Allan Collins documentary pieces for each episode, The History Behind the Mystery, which you can find on YouTube starting today. But that said, A World in Pajamas says Star Trek should be a world of stories. Picard talks about his first commission on a cargo ship. Stories don't have to be on starships, as DS9 proved. I know, right? I know. I don't know why things like that, why is it so beyond everybody? This simple feeling is beyond features comprehension. So, anyway, on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. Grok.